Hello, today I'm going to show you how to make a wizard staff, which eventually will look something like this. So if you want to make one, the first thing you're going to need is a stick, which can be anything that's basically about 1 metre long. Now this one I happen to collect from my garden. It's a bit of birch, but hazel or any other kind of straight stick will do, even a broom handle. Then the next thing you're going to need is 4 rags of any material, but it's best that they're this sort of colour, and they're about 1/2 metre long, an orange one, a bright green one, a blue one, and a sort of pink or purpley one will be fine. Then the next thing you will need is 4 strips of gold paper, about 2 centimetres wide, and they've got to be long enough to go around your stick like that, because you're going to be gluing them on. So you're going to need some glue, and likewise you're going to need 12 strips of silver paper, the same. You might be lucky enough to actually find tape, already sticky tape that's gold and silver, which is absolutely fine. And then today I'm going to show you how to make your first sign of time, and you're going to need 2 yellow pipe cleaners and 2 brown ones for today. So if you want to go and get all those materials together, pause the video and then come back when you're ready, and I'll show you how to make a wizard staff. And welcome back. So what exactly is a wizard staff? Well, essentially it's a calendar on a stick. But in the old days, ancient wizards, they wouldn't have had things like calendars as we do, paper ones, with months like January and March or whatever, and also all the days of the week. No, they wouldn't have had this. But the way they told time was by looking up at the skies, and especially the lengths of daylight when the sun was out. And they noticed that in midwinter there was a day when the daytime hours were the absolute shortest and the night was longest, and this was the winter solstice. So it was a very important date, roughly about December the 21st in our time. And they also would have noticed at the opposite end of the year, halfway through the year, there was midsummer, where the daytime was the longest and the night was the shortest. There were 2 other very significant moments in the year: the spring equinox and then the autumn equinox, which were halfway between these points. This is roughly March the 21st, and this is September the 21st in our time. And these were important days too, because they noticed that the daylight hours were exactly the same as the nighttime hours. They were 12 hours each, equal day and night. So these were 4 very important dates in an ancient calendar, and they would have marked them on a stick. So we're going to do that now too. Okay. So you need to get your metre long stick and your gold pieces of paper, because we're going to mark on these sun festivals, because it was all about the length of time that the sun was out in the day. So the first one we're going to put on is right in the middle of your stick. I find it's the easiest one, so you can spread them out. That's going to be our midsummer, our summer solstice. So literally all you need to do is get some glue and glue your bit of gold paper onto the centre of your stick like this. Okay. Then the end of your year, which is going to be the winter solstice, you need to put at the bottom of your stick. So again, you want to put that there. So now you've got the bottom of your stick, the winter solstice, which marks the end of your year, and the middle of the year. And then of course you'll just want to put your autumn equinox halfway between those 2, and your spring equinox just halfway between there and the top of your stick. So if you do that next, and then we're going to talk about the moons, because that was another way that the wizards were able to keep a sign of the time. So the other thing, of course, that the wizards would have noticed at night, because they wouldn't have been distracted by things like the TV or the internet, was the phases of the moon. And they would have noticed that every 28 days the moon was full, like this. It was a perfect circle. So this obviously was a very good way of marking time. And I suggest that you go out and see if you can see when the next full moon is, and look up at the sky and see it's a perfect circle. They also knew when the full moon was coming, because it would always be shining on this half, like this, facing this way, and that's called a waxing moon, i.e. it's getting fatter towards a full moon. If they looked up at the sky and they saw it was shining just on this side, they could only see this half of the moon, they knew that the full moon had just been and it was waning, it was getting thinner and thinner. And if they looked up at the sky and it wasn't there at all, they knew this was called moondark, or actually the new moon, i.e. the moon's, you're going to see it coming back, the cycle is repeating. So when there's no moon at all, it means it's a new moon. So I suggest you go out and have a practice, see if you can always try and look up the sky, see if you can tell what phase of the moon it is, but especially noticing when the full moon is. So the wizards would have marked, of course, full moons, very important time, and we're going to do this on our L-stick with silver paper. So this is where you are going to need a traditional calendar, one that actually has the phases of the full moons marked on it, or it's readily available on the internet if you just search, and you'll need to look for the dates. Now here is our staff for this year. Remember, it's at the moment, it's just got these key sun dates on it: March 21st, June the 21st, September the 21st, December the 21st. Now I happen to know in this year that we've got 2 full moons coming up. We've got one coming up at the end of January, and then another one at the end of February, and another one actually at the end of March, but it's just actually the 28th of March. So the full moon is going to be here. We just stick that on just after your spring equinox. So this might take a little time to work out, but don't worry, take your time, have a look, and remember you've got to put on 12 full moons throughout the year and stick them on correctly with your get your calendar and work out exactly where they are, carefully spaced out throughout the year. And when you've done that, you should have one. Here's what I've done earlier, of course, which looks like this. So just to repeat, I hope you can see this okay. So here we are, we're about just at the end of January here. A full moon's coming up on the 28th of January. Then there's another one in late February, that one in March, late April, late May, and here again just after the summer solstice, and then July, and then August, and then here again it's just after the autumn equinox, and late October, late November, and then December. But actually here it's just earlier, it's before the winter solstice. So you'll get the hang of this once you've had a good look at your calendar and carefully stick on your 12 phases of the moon. So once you've done that, you've got a pretty good idea of all the different markings of time throughout the year. But there was one more thing that the ancient peoples used to do, just to help them remember where they were during the year. And these are called the cross-quarter festivals, sometimes they're known as, but they were ancient festivals, another 4 celebrations, and for that we'll have to go back to our Wheel of the Year. Yes, so ancient people, they used to also mark time by having celebrations very sensibly, and they had 8 parties in the year to make sure they knew where they were and to celebrate all the changes in the seasons. So we had obviously the Midwinter Festival. We've talked about that already. That has now become our sort of Christmas. And the next festival would have been in the new moon. It was a moon festival. It was a new moon roughly at the beginning of February now in our time. And its name was Imbolc. And it was a celebration of the return of the light, especially in this part of the world and further up towards the Arctic Circle, where it's been basically dark for months. But the daylight hours were increasing, and there's a big celebration, as you can imagine, about the return of the light. And people would have noticed changes in nature, and here in the UK, one of the first things you'd notice is like these lovely hazel catkins that come out. We'll make some of those in a minute, but basically wizards would have looked for signs in nature and they would have put them on their sticks, hence that staff I showed you originally was so decorated with all those symbols. So going on, you then would have had, as we've talked about, spring equinox, fantastic time when spring was really starting, lots of flowers coming out, maybe some emerging insects and things like that. And then the next moon festival would have been May Day, as it's now known, or Beltane as it was known in those days. That again is a moon festival on the full moon in May. Huge celebrations of all the kind of magic of spring, and there would have been the flowers that come out, obviously things like bluebells we would notice in our woodlands here, and so on. And then obviously Midsummer Night's Eve, fantastic big party, because the night was so small, and the night hours were only maybe 1 or 2, so it was light nearly all day long. So big parties on Midsummer Night's Eve, big celebrations, lots of people wearing garlands, flowers in their hair, lots of flowers coming out in this part of our world. And then the next 2 full moons after that would have been Lammas, which is roughly about the beginning of August in this country. And that would have been a kind of celebration of all the harvest, all the crops ripening in the fields. Again, lots of different wildflowers coming out to mark that time. Through again to the autumn equinox, often a big celebration. Harvest festivals tended to happen around this time of year when the harvest was being gathered in. And then lastly, the last moon festival, which is on, again, a new moon dark, where there's no moon at all in the sky. Halloween, as it's now known, used to be called Samhain, and this was often thought in some religions as the actual end of the year, because then the earth sleeps through the midwinter to wake up again in the spring. So these 4 new festivals I'm telling you about, Imbolc, May Day, Lammas and Halloween, we are going to mark on our wizard staff with those coloured rags. So if you want to get those out, I'll show you where to put those next. So let's remind ourselves of where the markings are on your stick. So here is the January full moon coming up soon at the top of the stick. The next one is the February full moon. So the new moon, this Imbolc, which we were talking about earlier, is actually on the 13th of February this year. And we're going to mark that with the bright green rag, literally as a sign of returning light. So you just literally want to tie it on with a double knot. Actually, Imbolc is also the Chinese New Year, because their calendar is still based on all the phases of the moon. So Imbolc, there you go, beginning of February, new moon. The next moon celebration that we're going to talk about is the May Day one, Beltane, which is on the May full moon. So to count down, that's the February one, that's the March one, that's the April one. Here it is. This is the May full moon, the 5th moon on your stick, full moon. I'm going to mark that with a blue rag. Partly, I always think, to remind you of bluebells, because May Day is when you really want to get out to those woods and see if you can find some bluebells. Again, very important day in the calendar. So on we go throughout the year. June, Midsummer Night's Eve, June full moon, then the July full moon, and then the August full moon, which, if you remember, is this one here called Lammas. And again, big celebration of all the harvest, another big party, of course. So we're going to put that one here on that August full moon. And last but by no means least, of course, we have this other moon festival of Samhain, or Halloween as we now call it. So there's the September full moon, and there's the October full moon, which I know is at the end of October in this year. So the new moon would be roughly at the beginning of November. So it's between those two, the October and the November new moon. Because remember, Samhain was when the moon was dark. It was a new moon, gone altogether in the sky. Meant to be a very magical time when the veil is thin between our world and the world of fairies. So it was a very specific celebrated date and still is. And on we go obviously to November, December and the winter solstice. So now your wizard staff should be beginning to look a bit like this. You've got all these key dates to remind you of where you are in the calendar. But the wizards of course had another trick, which was to decorate their sticks with things that they saw regularly appearing in nature throughout the year. Now, it's thought actually they found some of these staffs in archaeological digs, and they've got the markings of these moons and these dates on them, and then they also had other markings which suggested birds or flowers or leaves. And this is how we're going to make it with our staff. So here, I'll show you this one from last year. And as you can see, it's got this, look, what are they? Well, they are hazel catkins. We're going to talk about those in a minute. And then there's butterflies, bees. This actually represents frog spawn. All these things that you see in nature, and that's the key to a really good wizard staff, is to mark on what we call these signs of time. I'm just going to put that down there. So right now, one of the first things that you might see out and about in nature, if you go to a local park or if you go to a local woodland, is this lovely thing here. Can you see that okay? These are hazel catkins. You see they're lovely, long, they hang down, also sometimes called lamb's tails. These lovely little yellow catkins. Oh, dropping here. Always one of the first things that you see in this part of the world, in England, at this time of the year. So, rather than carving it onto our stick, this is where you can use any craft materials that happen to be handy. Pipe cleaners are always great to have if you've got them in your craft boxes. So we're going to make some hazel catkins very simply. Take your yellow pipe cleaner, fold it in half like that. Make another one. Fold it in half like that, and then you just want to attach it to your brown pipe cleaner just by twisting them round. Yeah, and you might want to fold them a bit, and then another one. There you go, and you just want to maybe look, so that's beginning to look quite similar to a hazel catkin. And then you just need to attach it to your staff on the right time. So here we are, we're not quite here at the full moon, so I'm going to put my hazel catkin on here to show, and just twist it on like this. And that's all I'm going to ask you to do today, because this is the start of your wizard staff. But we're going to keep coming back and revisiting this stuff throughout the year, and as soon as you see something new in nature that's come out, I want you to make a version of it and put it on your stick. And we're going to come back around about midsummer to see how we've got on. But just to give you some idea of the kind of things that you're likely to see next, let's go back to this one. So can you see this okay? Right. So yes, hazel catkins. Another thing you might see coming out in, certainly on some sunny days in February, might be this brimstone butterfly, beautiful yellow butterfly that's been hibernating all winter. So you can make one out of paper and again some pipe cleaners, whatever you have lying around. Maybe you'll be lucky enough to see one of these. Can you see her all right? She's a bumblebee. Again, queen bumblebees, been hibernating all winter. They emerge again sometimes late February, early March, depending on how warm it is. I've made one out of a bit of black cloth and again some pipe cleaners. Now this one happens to be, if you can see, a white-tailed bumblebee. I've given her a white bottom. Lots of different bees will come out. It's really quite nice to keep making lots of bees and adding them to your staff as you go on. And then here, now this bit of bubble wrap represents frog spawn. Because actually frogs and toads and all other amphibians actually do tell the time by the phases of the moon. And that's because they all have to return to the pond that they were born in at the same time to meet all the other frogs and toads and to make more frog spawn. And it makes sense if you think about it, because they can't possibly tell what time of year it is apart from what they can looking up and seeing the moon. So they all gather together and they can see the full moons coming, and they head back to their pond to meet all their old friends. And sometimes normally that will be the March full moon, but if it's been particularly cold, it might be the April full moon. So look out for that one. You'll see that the frogs and our amphibians, they tell the time by looking at the moon too. Other things that you might see that coming out, of course, as spring starts to happen. This is a little hawthorn leaf. You can actually obviously put the real thing on if you want, when they start to appear. And then, as I was saying earlier, round about Beltane, you might be able to see these bluebells. Again, I've made those literally out of tissue paper and pipe cleaner. And lastly, for this half of the year, these black feathers represent swifts, because very important to look up and get to know some of the migrating birds. And swifts come back to this country about the first week of May, so you might be lucky enough to see your first swift. But these are all signs of times in nature that you can look out for, and there'll be many more I haven't even put on here yet, like say when the blackthorn blossom first starts to come out, that lovely white frothy flower that you'll see in the hedgerows. We will be posting things on our Facebook page, our Fairyland Trust Facebook page, as and when we see them come out. We invite you to do the same, send in your photographs, and then we can be making things together and adding them to our wizard staff throughout the year. And like I said, we'll come back and we'll revisit this around about midsummer to see how you've got on. So obviously I hope you enjoy making your wizard staff, but also remember that the wizards who made them in the olden days, they were very clever and they noticed all this stuff, and so they got to be very good at predicting what would happen next, which always impressed the other villagers, because they would say, oh yes, I think in a couple of nights' time we shall see frog spawn, and people think they're awfully clever, but it's basically just because they'd made a wizard staff the year before and they knew how to keep time. So I hope you do enjoy making the wizard staff with us throughout this year. Thank you.